Post as well. Hi, everyone. Everyone that's with us this morning. Oh my goodness. Hello. Welcome to PNACAC's final webinar in our College Counseling 101 series. Sorry for the weird start that we had. Sorry, I'm going to fix up on my screen. My name is Ray Pepley, and I'm the College and Career Counselor at Owyhee High School in Meridian, Idaho, and I am one of the chairs of PNACAC's PNACAC's Professional Development Committee. Sorry, and I'm joined today by Palmer, who I might have to give over the. I have to have him speak, I think. Palmer is the other professional development co-chair, and we're the ones who kind of brought this series together, and this is our last one, and we're so glad that you guys are with us today. Big apologies to all the counselors in Idaho. You're going to watch this recorded because today is SAT day in the state of Idaho, so all the other counselors, except for me, are testing juniors. So I apologized in the fall. I'm apologizing again today, but so they'll watch it, the recording version of it. But today's topic is the school profile and what colleges want to see on our profile. I've been waiting for this one for 8 webinars, and our speaker again today is Pat O'Connor, who has been just so huge for Palmer and I. His expertise, his kindness, his love, just all those things. We appreciate him so much. His street cred, I'm going to call it. So thanks again for being here today, Patrick, and helping us. Couple of things that we usually kind of share at the beginning too is that the chat's disabled, but Q&A is enabled. So if you want to shoot us a Q&A question, Palmer and I might be able to answer it in the Q&A, but if we can't, we'll save it to the end and then we'll ask that question of Patrick. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that, again, this is being recorded, but it does take us a few days to render the recording. So you won't get the recording until early next week. But when you get that recording, you're also going to see a survey. When we're hoping, Palmer and I are hoping that all of you can complete this survey for us. We just want your advice, your thoughts on how this year went. Just a quick reminder that this was truly intended for brand new counselors. That was our intent with all of these topics. And so we want to know just thoughts on next year, because we're hoping to do this again next year. Like, what are some burning topics that we didn't cover this year that would be really helpful? So thanks in advance for filling out that questionnaire, the survey for us. Did I forget anything, Palmer?
No, I think that's good. And yeah, I also am looking forward to, I think I'm going to learn a lot from this one too, Pat. So yeah. But yeah, please put questions in the Q&A that you might be curious about, and we'll be sure to work on those at the end, if not as it's going.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, Ray. Good morning, Palmer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. I'm putting this one together. I don't know if you've been watching the video. Can you see the video? Everybody can see I'm sharing the screen, right? Yeah. So, what I find fascinating about these young people is that not only can they throw their hats in the air, they come right back to them. So no, I think this video is just, I think they're basically on reverse. So, but in any case,
that's actually what we want that to happen. We want
that's
them,
right.
like,
Yes,
they want to take it home. So this was perfect.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about school profiles today, and really appreciate those that have come to learn about them. I learned a couple of things in doing some research on this. So we'll jump right into it. But school profile is really sort of an unknown territory for a lot of folks. So grateful to have the opportunity to chat with you. And again, my thanks to PNACAC and Ray and Palmer in particular for the chance to chat with new counselors. Always a privilege to help and give you what little I know, and hopefully it'll be of help to you as time goes on. So here's what we'll talk about today. What is a school profile? What colleges are looking for in a profile. There are some do's and don'ts, believe it or not. So hopefully you'll be able to learn from the pros, from the experts. I did, in addition to doing some traditional research, actually did a little bit of an informal poll of college folks and said, what should go in, what should go out. And so I'm going to share some of that wisdom with you today. Other uses of the profile. Many high school counselors are surprised to find that there are other uses for your high school profile other than simply sending it off to colleges. And then protecting your profile. We'll talk more about how to make sure that your profile says what you want it to say. It's not rocket science, but it's also important to keep in mind that the information on a school profile can be misused by folks. So we want to make sure that you're using it in the right way, and other folks are as well. And then, of course, we'll have lots of time for your questions. So please feel free. So, okay. So just as sort of a prelude, if you are a member of the National Association for College Admission Counseling, if you're a member of NACAC, there's actually a very nice, short and sweet booklet that NACAC produces called Best Practices for Developing a School Profile. From start to finish, it's 10 pages, but when you get through with the introductions and the acknowledgments, it actually gets down to about 5 or 6. So it's a very, very quick read, and most of the ideas that I've brought to you today are taken from this actual resource. So if you need to revisit it, or looking for a hard copy and you're a NACAC member, you can download this. It's free to NACAC members, and it's downloadable with no problem at all. So when we talk about a school profile, what exactly are we talking about? Well, a school profile, of course, is a document designed to help colleges assess the variables associated with the students. Well, you see the quote there, right? Basically, here's the thing. The question you want to answer in writing is this one. If a college knew nothing about your high school, what would you want to tell them, right? They're reading your student's application. They have questions about their grades. They have questions about if it's a highly competitive school. They want to know, how has this student performed versus other students? What are the academic strengths of your school? In some cases, they want to know if there is a college-going tradition at your school, which can factor in a number of ways. So all of these basic information pieces about your school and to some extent about your community are what makes up a school profile. So it's basically a written snapshot of everything that you would want a college to know about your school if they were getting to know it for the first time. And that's what a school profile is. So, right. And this is the piece that really kind of threw me for a loop. Do all high schools have a profile? And the answer is about 75% do. But this is the part that's sort of a wake-up call. And it's no surprise. Those schools that do not tend to be in lower income communities or have a smaller percentage of students going to college. And so this is, again, one of those unfortunate situations where, the schools that really don't need to introduce themselves because they already send a lot of kids to college, they do it. They have a profile. Whereas the high schools that may not have a college-going tradition, who really do need to communicate effectively with colleges about everything their high school is all about, those are the schools that tend not to, and that's a problem. So if you're one of the folks out there, if you're one of those high schools that does not have a profile, let me urge you to jump on the internet, take a look at some sample profiles there, and then use the information here presented in the presentation to take a look as well. So right, so there we are. Okay, so what do colleges look for in a profile? Well, there's 5 or 6 sections of material that they're looking for. The first is actually just sort of some raw data. And even though this list looks pretty intimidating, honestly, by the time you put all of this stuff together, this is going to be, believe it or not, about 5 or 6 lines tops. So the description looks pretty impressive, but this is basically just here's the kind of school we are, here's where we are, here's how you can find out more about us, and here's the size of the school. If your enrollment figures do not do it, you want to specifically indicate how big your senior class is. You want to put in your SAT and ACT code numbers. And then, the piece that sometimes people get a little crazy with is the community overview, the population, the demographics, and the locale. you know, that you want to give an accurate description of it, but you also don't want to go into like paragraphs with this. It would help as a suggestion if you're doing a community overview and you happen to have a chamber of commerce in your city, or if it's somewhere in your city government there's a description of the town and its demographics, put that website, put that link in there instead of describing it yourself, because it's gonna save a lot of time. And that's one thing, you know, one thing that colleges have said is they really want profiles to be thorough but efficient. And so we have to be careful not to get into like many pages of description here. So again, what you're looking at, believe it or not, that's going to take up maybe a third, but probably even less of a page. But it's basically here's a basic intro along with some contact information. And then continuing with part 2, more specific information is about school counselors and school leadership information. Contact information for counseling staff is imperative. And again, as a heads up, if you have a system either by email or by telephone where all calls initially go to a secretary or to an administrative office or to someone, just make sure that that's the phone number that's there. If you give them a phone number or an email address that doesn't get answered or doesn't get tended to right away, that's going to be a problem. And if they try and call you and they automatically go to a voicemail place, you're going to want to try and make sure that call gets to a number where it's answered right away. So again, just make sure that contact information is not only up to date, but it's effective in terms of providing answers. Because most of the time when a college reviews a profile, if somebody is reading a student's application and they have an immediate question that needs to be answered about that particular student. So make sure that that contact information is relevant and up to date. Okay, the next section is academics. Basically, because we have so many high schools with so many different grading scales and so many different ways of approaching grading, this piece is, by most colleges, is considered to be the most important. They want to know what your grading scale is. They want to know how you compute GPA. Is it all semesters? Is it 10th and 11th grade only? Is it by year? And do you include class rank? If you do, how that's calculated. If you don't, this is not a place where you have to justify if you do class rank or not. There are lots of high schools that don't, and many colleges are fine with, and all colleges are fine with that. But if you do class rank, they want to understand how you came to that. Your grade distribution, again, if you haven't seen a grade distribution, this is basically, it can be done a couple of different ways. It tends to be given, from ranges of like 2 to 2.5, 2.6 to 3.0. It also can be distributed by percentage. So the top 10% of our class had a grade point of this, the next 10% had this, the next 10% had that. Policies on weighting courses and on repeating courses. Again, there are some high schools where if you repeat a course, only the second attempted grade is the one that shows up and the other one disappears. They need to know that. What happens if a student takes a class twice? Your graduation requirements, again, if you have a link to those rather than listing all of them, that would be helpful and save some time. And then also, of course, the last piece, whether or not your school allows you to report disciplinary infractions to colleges or not, that's an important piece for them to know as well. Many high schools do not. And if you haven't thought about that, this would be the time to do that, quite honestly, where you give some thought to whether or not your school reports disciplinary infractions. If you're coming up with that policy, if you don't have one, let me encourage you to first of all get one, but secondly, don't make it up by yourself. Whatever you end up doing has to be legally sound, And so this is going to be one of those rare instances where you're going to want to utilize the resources of your legal department in terms of understanding what you can and cannot report. Okay. Next, of course, our average test scores. And I will preface my remarks here by saying that not all schools report average ACT and SAT scores. I was at a school that did not, and we did so for good reason. Our graduating class was, I think, 50 students at the most in any given year. And we just felt that for us to try and share average SAT and ACT scores with a class that small really did not do justice to our students. We felt it would be a lazy way for colleges to try and judge and rank our students. And so we just basically didn't give them that opportunity. Instead, we decided simply to say that we don't publish those scores, and you're more than welcome to read them. That was never a problem, by the way, for any colleges. There was one that had an issue with it, but then they said, well, you know, you don't rank your kids, you don't give us average SAT scores, so we're going to have to just basically guess based on past applicants from previous years. And we were okay with that. I mean, they need to do what they need to do, but we just weren't going to give them the opportunity to sort of take a shortcut. If you have a larger population, or if you are required to post scores, here are some provided guidelines, and the big one, of course, is at the top. If you do provide average scores, you want to provide the middle 50% range, not a particular average. So rather than saying your class average was 20, you want to say 50% of the students in the middle scored between a range of 19 and 24. That range is very important. Again, making sure you're giving your students every opportunity to be reviewed individually. Okay, curriculum descriptions. And again, this is another piece that's fairly big. Excuse me. Curricular offerings, including advanced curriculum. Most of the folks, the counselors or college folks that I interviewed said they really want to understand a couple of pieces out of this, and you're welcome to read all of this at your leisure. But basically, the big piece is how many advanced placement courses you have, and also how many honors courses you have and what they're called. And also, the other piece there is what's the highest or most challenging course that you offer. This is especially true for your math and science curriculum. If a student is applying to an engineering school and they have taken pre-calculus, there's a good chance that they will not be as academically rigorous as other students from other high schools. But on the other hand, if pre-calculus is the highest math course you offer, well, that's something the college needs to take into consideration. So again, listing your highest course in each subject area does prove to be important. And especially if it's not designated on the transcript as an honors class, listing your honors courses also proves to be extremely helpful as it relates to the profile. So that matters pretty significantly as well. Okay, so those are sort of the big chunks in terms of what we're looking for in a profile. And then here's sort of a quick summary of what the colleges have said. Most of them reiterated the points that I just made and said, well, make sure you have this, make sure we can get a hold of you, we know how to contact you, give us some context of your community, those kinds of things. But here are some specific things that they said. They want to make sure the profile is short. Many of them said they wanted a 1 or a 2 page profile. And that's, as someone who did this at several schools, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. You might at first think that, well, how hard can this be? But once you go back to the 4 sections we just reviewed, I think you'll see that, even with a small typeface, it's going to be a little tough getting all that information listed in there. So 1 page is great, 2 is fine. Evidently, there are some high schools out there that get to 8 or 9 pages on their profile. My friends, that's just way too much. I was at one school where we had a 4-page profile, and we got the feeling from our college friends that that was okay. But the reason it was okay was because most of the 3rd page and all of the 4th page was a list of colleges our students had been admitted to over the last 3 years. That piece, by the way, there are some colleges who have said they really don't care where your kids go to college. And so, but it is a very traditional piece of a high school profile, is a listing of where students were admitted in the last 2 to 3 years, and also where they attended in the last 2 to 3 years. So that is a piece that for a whole number of reasons usually ends up in a profile. Some colleges said they didn't really care about that. Others said they did. So that's kind of up to you, but we'll talk more about why that becomes more important to you in other audiences for another reason. Most said that most demanding classes is very important. Again, they want to have a clear sense that out of all the courses that the students can take, have they really challenged themselves with your curriculum? And the only way they can do that is if they know what the challenging courses are. So communicating that proves to be very important as you continue to communicate effectively with these schools. GPA distribution, if you don't do class rank, GPA distribution proves to be very important to schools. Again, there are some colleges that will simply make it up and then kind of go from there. But it's really best if you can come up with your own GPA distribution and share that with the colleges. That would be helpful. So that's good too. The other thing that I will say, it was on a list, but I want to sort of bring it out a little bit here. Once your profile is up, put it on your counseling page, your counseling website, if you have one, or your high school website, if you have one, because there will be some colleges that will be curious about getting to know your institution before they visit, or before they even read any files. Sometimes we have new admissions officers who want to get to know their schools better, and we'll do that by looking on your website. And so you want to give them the opportunity to review what the profile is all about there as well. Okay, so those are the do's. Let's talk a little bit about don'ts. First of all, the first one that's here is basically saying, visually, you want to make sure to put this information together in a way that helps, that's helpful, and it's not just one big chunk of written information. This is where you may decide that you're going to hire a graphic designer to put your materials together. A lot of places do this. Some will actually have a student do it, or a member of the faculty from the art department will do it. But again, this is one of those things where if you give them the information, you want to make sure the information is put together in a way that's helpful for them. And so make sure that it's visually valuable to them in terms of labeling and identifying sections. Again, the grading system is not clearly explained or easy to find. And again, make sure, this is a reminder, you need to update your profile really, quite honestly, annually. Because the list, the GPAs from previous years is not particularly helpful. The average SAT score from last year is not particularly helpful. Every class is different, and so they need to know the latest information, and talk about that information as well. So again, that's also highlighted in these next two what to avoids. You know, some profiles list all accomplishments and extracurricular activities of students. Quite honestly, you know, I think when we talk about clubs and activities for students, most colleges would prefer to see that in a student's application rather than in the profile, simply because it can take up a huge amount of space. And you know, we want to make sure that our students mention everything they do. And we as counselors, of course, we want to highlight the exceptional ones, but those are usually highlighted in your letters, which we've talked about in a previous PD program. But if, you know, if you have a student who is the first student in your high school to qualify on the national Latin exam, you want to explain that someplace, but you probably don't want to explain it on the profile. You probably want to explain that in the counselor letter that you're writing for that student. Again, every college acceptance for the past 5 years, you really don't need to do 5 years. 2 is good, 3 is okay. But if it's more than that, sometimes that list can get very lengthy. And all of a sudden you're looking at a 5 or 6 page profile. Names of staff, but no contact details. That one drives them really crazy. So again, make sure that next to those staff names, you've got a phone number and an email address. And then again, make sure it's somewhere on the website where it's all in one page. It should be a PDF that when you click it, you get to see the whole thing. And again, make sure those web links are up to date in the profile on a regular basis. Okay, so that's basically what the colleges are looking for in a profile. But it should not surprise you that when you put together a nice 2-page, 3-page summary of what your high school is all about, that information is of value to other organizations as well. And in fact, it can be of advantage to you, quite honestly, with this first group. Many times parents in particular have said things to me like, well, you know, what if they don't know about our school? How do you tell them what they need to know about our institution so they really get to know what the place is all about? Well, sharing the school profile at parent and student group presentations, you know, we used to have a 9th, 10th, and 11th grade parent college night at my last school. And sharing the profile was extremely helpful there because this sort of eased their concerns and said, well, you know, most of the schools that our kids apply to, the admissions folks know us pretty well, but if it's a brand new school, this is how they get to find out about it. That is a key communication piece that can really make a big difference. Again, with other community outreach groups, this could be the boys club, the girls club, religious-based youth groups, any group that really is, or any CBO, community-based organization that may be helping students apply to college. Sharing a copy of your profile is probably a pretty good idea because it will give them the tools that they need to help their students and help them understand how they can best support their students. So that's a big piece. Often it's sent as part of a scholarship or summer program application in case those folks are interested who are reviewing those applications are interested in finding out how rigorous and what your community is all about. And then for better or for worse, this has also become a valuable tool to the real estate agents in your community because they can then brag about all the opportunities that exist in schools and give a nice 1 or 2-page summary of what a school is all about in the words of the school. And so now that can sometimes be a two-edged sword because We also have discovered that there are some school administrators who put a little bit of pressure on their college school counselor folks to include a lot of things on their profile that are more about selling the school than they are about helping a kid with a college application. And so you want to make sure that that the profile that's being produced is achieving its primary goal, which is to help colleges best understand where your students are and what they've experienced in their 4 years there. So how do you do that? Well, the first one, and it kind of goes without saying, but the first step, of course, is to protect your profile. So that means, unfortunately, what that means is that the person who updates and edits every year is you. This is not something you hand off to an administrative assistant. It's not something you give to a vice principal, because the moment you give this to somebody else who is not directly focused on the college process, that's when they start adding things that begin to weigh down the profile, and then it becomes of less value to colleges. So this is your thing to do, and if at some point, as was the case at one of my other schools, if at some point it seems like this is more of a principal's brag sheet than it is a high school profile, you may wish to consider creating 2 different versions of the profile. One for the colleges and one to keep your administrator happy for whatever audience they might be interested in. That is more work, obviously, but at the same time, that is something that you may wish to consider. Again, colleges don't want material they can't use. And so it proves to be important to make sure that you're that you're providing them with all the information they need, but not much more than that, because they are, after all, pretty busy people. So it is important to protect this communication piece and help support your students in the best way possible. Okay, so that's sort of a a quick overview there. We'll stop and take questions at this point, and it looks like my internet's a little well. As we do that, I'm going to do my best to try and find a couple of examples of some school profiles that do not appear to be showing up on my screen. So Palmer and Ray, if we've got a couple of questions, this might be a good time to throw those in while I do a little quick typing here.
You bet. So one of the questions, Andrea, great question. She wanted to know what you mean by grade cohorts, which you include in your school population. Are you talking about like 9th grade has this many students, 10th grade, this many students? Is that what you meant by cohort?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Cohort.
Okay.
Cohort. Yeah. That's exactly what that means.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let me know, Andrea, if we didn't answer that the way. Oh, Andrea, you have such good questions. Andrea also wanted to know that sports were not mentioned. Are colleges looking for athletics? I think you answered that in later after she posed that question.
Yeah, they do. There certainly are some places that will want to know about that, and obviously, if you if your school is, I worked at a school, for example, where we had our first team state championship in the history of the school. That's obviously something that needs to be posted there as well. And if you have a significant athletic success, a summary of that is what you want to do. You really don't want to devote a full page to how many trophies you've won over the last 50 years.
Yeah,
that's not helpful at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, while you look for that, I'll just answer this one for Andrea. Another question about emailing the examples of good profiles. So yeah, we can add that to our next correspondence when we send out the video from this webinar. Andrea, we can send maybe have attachments of a couple of really good.
Yep.
Patrick,
absolutely.
Profiles.
Patrick,
so,
I actually
that's what I'm always looking for too, Andrea. Is like
something to copy and steal, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, use as your guide, like, okay, this is what they want.
So, Patrick, I actually had a couple of questions myself. I don't know if others will want to weigh in, but
Oh, sure, Paul.
I'm
Go ahead.
conscious of the fact that, being at University of Alaska Fairbanks, a lot of the high schools in Alaska are extremely small and may have really limited curriculum. It's not unusual for us to have schools up there that may have half a dozen high school seniors graduating.
Wow.
How would you handle this when you're at a small school with a limited curriculum? How would you use the profile in that sense?
Well, that's a great question, Palmer. I think the beauty of being a small school is that you're at a point where, your profile is likely not going to be 4 pages. And so this gives you the unique opportunity of creating a profile that's almost individualized to the student. And so that creates a good possibility. I think I would take some care to make sure you craft the curriculum piece in a way that maybe end up being more descriptive than labeling. It may not be a list of your most demanding classes, but rather be descriptive. And especially if you have a number of those that small graduating class, a number of students who ended up taking online courses. Did they take classes at a local community college? Do they have access for those kinds of things? Those are always good information. That's always good information to have on a profile, period. But it's especially true if you're going to try and create a profile that really is going to meet the needs of those smaller students. But if to your point, if the school is a small one with a curriculum that isn't that is equally small for all the right reasons, then you want to, when you're done with your first draft of your profile, you want to ask yourself, does this really give an accurate picture? Does, if I read this, do I get that? Do I understand that this is a small school with limited access? And narrative can do that in ways that lists cannot. If you say, for example, if you say, we serve 450 students in 135 square miles. Well, okay, if you do numbers, that's a big space and not many kids. But at the same time, for those who are sort of number phobic, that doesn't tell you much. So you need to make sure that you're describing this in a way that effectively talks about the limitations.
See, another question came in. This is a great question that I hadn't thought of at all. Any thoughts about dual enrollment, middle college type of programs and how those should be reflected on the profile?
Yep, absolutely. It's it will be important with those kinds of programs to talk about how available they are, and quite frankly, a couple of things that you want to include are how many students overall take advantage of them, and when they can take advantage of them. So, it may be that at a high school of 1,500 students, if you just say, well, dual enrollment's available, well, okay, that's nice, but I think you're better off to say dual enrollment is available to students who have exhausted the curriculum at our school, and last year out of a school of 1,500 kids, 42 kids took advantage of dual enrollment. So because, if you give them a piece of information that says, if it says, for example, we have AP classes, well, okay, and then they don't see any on the transcript, that could cause some confusion unless you say, well, we offer AP classes, but we offer them after school as a bonus hour, and 80% of our kids work. Then all of a sudden, that's the context the college needs to make this work. So remember, the reason you're giving them a profile is to give them added information that helps them evaluate the readiness of a student. That's the ultimate goal.
That's a good point. Made me think about the difference between Washington and Idaho. So in Washington, where you all are, Palmer, your students have Running Start, where they leave the high school campus and go to a community college, right, to take credits.
Right.
Whereas in Idaho, our teachers are vetted by the colleges, and they deliver the curriculum within the classroom during the school day. So I think it'd be so important for a college to know that too. that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, first, yeah, because I think it shows a difference in their program and how it's being delivered and who's delivering the content. Is it a high school teacher that's been vetted by a college to deliver their curriculum, or are they actually going on a campus? So I think that's a good point.
Yep. Yeah, that is a key point. So, well, okay. So a quick look at a couple of, and then I'll send some links off to Ray and Palmer so they can present these along with the PowerPoint. But as you see here with Santa Margarita,
No,
yeah.
we can't.
We need to, you need to
didn't.
unshare and then find the right screen for you, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Hang on.
Gotta love Zoom.
All right.
Hey, while you change that, Sarah had a good, just to follow up to Rebecca's question. So she said they were thinking about students who are in full-time in college, like Running Start. I don't know if did we answer that, Sarah? Because I think, yeah, Running Start is a program in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Where they,
And
where they're leaving class, they're leaving the school
often.
building to go to a community college. Yeah, so you would want that highlighted on your your profile. Because like in my state, in my district, many of our students have a partnership with Boise State where they are taking classes to achieve their associate degree while they're still in high school. And so I put that on our profile. This many schools receive their associate degree from Boise State. So you'd probably want to do the same for Running Start in Washington.
Yep.
Let us know if we didn't answer that right, or if you need more information.
Absolutely. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
It's very small, but yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So a little on the dinky side. All right. Let me see what I can do here.
Well, we can also, also share it as an attachment too.
Yeah.
But that one's
okay.
fancier than anything I've ever done.
Well, yeah. Well, and this is one of the reasons why I like this one, quite honestly, is because there's so much information on that page. And it's not, for those who are thinking, boy, this is going to be reading Dickens, that they've come up with a really great way of getting a lot to the point. You look at those left things on the left, there's some great information there. Right. And so, you see a description of the institution, you see the contact information, you see some vital statistics that are popping out to you. This is really a pretty well put together and fairly engaging profile. And on page 1, and it provides an awful lot of information. Now, quite honestly, I'm not as nuts about the graphics, just because I think sometimes tables are used to hide information rather than explain them. But that's just my natural approach to tables in general. So again, when we take a look at a different school, here we are for the school at Lucerne. Again, some statistics, and I don't think we have anybody here from international schools, but do keep in mind that if you are a school that caters to international students, or if you have a lot of students who are applying overseas, it may be best to contact those schools directly and find out what they're looking for in terms of additional test scores, the background of your students and whatnot. This is a pretty good attempt at doing just that. So that's a pretty effective first page. And again, notice all in the blue box in the bottom, you can't probably see that, but that's all the contact information. Everything that they want, the names of the folks, their email addresses, how to get a hold of them, all that is very nicely and succinctly put together at the bottom of the page. So this one is a little more traditional in the sense that it's a lot of copy. Gotta admit, I'm not as fond of this one simply because I'm looking at this and I'm already tired. So I think, when you take a look at this and then you go back to our first example, you can see this is why graphic designers get paid the big bucks they do. Because remember, it's one thing to give them the information, it's another to give them the information in a way that they will do something with. And so you have to, again, keep that in mind. And That's also the piece that I would, I don't want to get crazy about length, but that's also the thing that I would keep in mind as it relates to the size of your profile. Once you get past 2 pages, and anything that's on page 3 better be really important. If page 3 is your list of colleges that students attended in the last 2 or 3 years, that's more than fine. But your narrative in terms of all the other stuff really should nice and conveniently fit in 2 pages in a way that's graphically and visually appealing, if at all possible. So yeah, so that's again, some quick examples. We'll send some links where you can take a closer look and make some judgment calls. The other piece that I would advise you to do is make sure, especially if you're doing this for the first time, give yourself lots and lots of time. It takes a while to do this, and even if you're just updating, you might think, well, you update your average test scores, you update your class GPA distribution, you update the college list, and you're done. Well, yeah, but then that means you got to find that information, and that's not always available in the school counseling office. You have to get it to the graphic designer, you have to get a proof back, and then it goes to the printer. And given that my father was a printer, I can tell you those guys are wonderful people, but they're not the most prompt folks on God's green earth. So, you probably need to make sure that you're giving yourself more time than you think you need to make sure that profile is available the first day of school.
That's great.
One thing while we were preparing to start the webinar, Ray and I were talking, and one thing I was realizing as we were chatting is I don't think that I've walked in to visit a high school as a college rep probably in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe the last 5 years, that I've been handed a school profile by the counselor. Pat, when you were an active counselor in the high schools, how did you use the profile? Did you hand that to admissions counselors as they came to the school and walk through that, or what?
Yeah, we we actually did a little bit of both, Palmer. I think we broke the first rule of communication, which was give them something in writing and then talk about something else. But I think what at both of my previous institutions, which tended to be on the small side, we gave them a copy of the profile because we wanted to make sure it was in their file, and because again, when you send these things as attachments, some electronic attachments, sometimes they print them and sometimes they don't. So I would present them with a profile and a brief description of what was in there. Again, I wouldn't go over it page by page because, typically when I met with reps and as a school counselor, we had about 5 minutes to get together. And so I would just highlight, particularly if it was a seasoned admissions officer, I'd say, well, here's this year's profile. Here's what's new at the school. What's new with you guys? What's changed in your world? So yes, I did. I did hand it as a tool. And then in some cases, if I knew I had more time, or if there was someone new to the school, I would spend a little more time talking about the profile and highlighting some sections for them to read later on.
I actually had a question related to the college list myself, and that is there a time when the college list could actually work against an applicant? And I know sometimes we get real paranoid here, but I'm picturing, for instance, a situation where a university might look at a college list and see students admitted to selective institutions, but not enrolling at selective institutions. Do you have any thoughts on, have you ever seen the college list be a negative factor?
Boy, that's a great question, Palmer. I have not, at least, but again, at least I've never been made aware of the fact that it was an issue, is the best way I can put that. I think every once in a while there are folks who say the opposite, where it's the profile says that the kids have never and admitted to a highly selective school? And is that a cause of concern? The answer is no, because what happens is the minute that a student applies someplace, the rep pulls up that school's file and says, okay, what's our track record with this institution? So if the school is brand new to you, then looking at the profile and realizing this kid could be a groundbreaker could actually work to their advantage or disadvantage. But I have never been told where the list serves to be disadvantageous. Now that's assuming, though, and you raise a good point, Palmer. Most schools that have this list, the list is written in two different ways. It's a list of everywhere where they were admitted, but then in bold or in italic or in a different typeface are the list is the name of the schools where the student actually matriculated. So you basically get two lists within a list. You get one list of every place where they were admitted, and you get a list of the places where they ended up going.
So let me ask a follow-up. So I asked earlier about small schools. If there's only 20 kids in the school, you probably know where they all ended up.
Right.
Some of our counselors are places where they might have 1,000 or 800 students.
Wow.
How do you form a college list? How do you collect that information, or do you even attempt it when you're dealing with huge numbers and perhaps a small staff?
Yeah. Well, I was at my last high school was a school with 800 students, 9 through 12. So by no means gigantic, but, somewhat formidable. And we had the good fortune of being a school where participation in graduation was highly valued. And so, so our deal was you didn't get your tickets for mom and dad to sit until you gave us the list of where you'd been admitted. So, that was kind of the key piece. But if there are places where that's just simply out of the question, one way to partially develop a list is, most colleges will at some point email you a list and say, here's all our students who we admitted from your high school. We need final transcripts from all of these folks. And you can use those to begin to put together a partial list. But you just characterize your list as these are examples. Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You can certainly put a word in that says, this list includes, but this list is not comprehensive, and then just kind of take it from there. But I worked at a place that had 1,000 students as graduates, and those kids were actually pretty proud of where they were going, and so they were more than happy to tell us and honestly convey where they planned on attending, and so that was a huge help for us as well.
If you were at a small high school, do you think it would then make more sense to provide a list of colleges that spans maybe 5 years rather than just 2 or 3? Or would you still keep it short? Okay.
No, unless these kids are applying to 20 colleges each. But no, if we're talking about a class of 10 kids where they each apply to 6 to 8 schools, at best, that's going to fill up half a page on a profile. And it more important, to your point, Palmer, it's a more accurate distribution of where students have been going. You don't want to over exaggerate it. I was at one place where they kept wanting to add the last 6th, 7th, 8th year because that class was really great. And it's like, no, you can't do that. But on the other hand, if you have a graduating class of 10 kids and 6 of them went to college, that list isn't going to mean much if it's just from last year. So in that case, a 5-year span is more than appropriate. In fact, it's more honest, quite honestly.
Well, I just want to say I've never thought of giving a college list or putting that on my profile. Mine has always said this percentage goes 4 year, this percentage goes so from last year, because I'll highlight last year's group and I'll say for the class of 2020, what is it, 2022, this many matriculated to a 4-year, this many to a 2-year, this many to trade, this one in military. So I actually never thought of putting in my profile the places that students have gone. So I have to think about how I'm going to do that. But
yeah, well, it's a good, well, as Ray is the other thing, and you've reminded me of an important point. I have seen some profiles where they list the number of students who were admitted to those particular schools.
yeah.
Quite honestly, I would not do that. And the reason I wouldn't do that is because it's probably not accurate.
Right.
But also I think it also kind of gives a little bit too much information, in the sense that, you know, if 80% of your kids end up going to in-state 4-year institutions, that could be back to what a point Palmer was trying to make. You know, that may give pause to an out-of-state private to say, well, why would I bother admitting a kid when most of their friends stay home?
That was
Right.
exactly
So,
what I was wondering.
Good point.
Yeah, so I'm really not keen about a distribution of colleges, frequency distribution of colleges. The names are more than fine.
Okay, great. Wow. Well, thank you. I think this has been wonderful. Appreciate you, Pat.
Yep. Well, again, many thanks, my friends, and for the opportunity to do this, and again, thanks to all the counselors for taking the time to do this. And I hope the day went well for our Idaho friends with the SAT.
Yeah, sure did. I'm sure they're looking forward to watching this next week. So, but thank you. Appreciate all of you for joining us today, and watch for our follow-up survey. Yeah, have a great day. Bye.